We are back, picking up where we left off on the last video on the Madnette. Okay. So where we left off in the last video is I had most of this rocker cut out except for a little piece here. I got that out since the last video, but I've been staring at this area contemplating what I'm going to do with it. Now the MG Madnette was MG's first unibody construction car, and some of the areas were a little on the complicated side, being their first try at it. This is one of those. So instead of having a full rocker and sill assembly going from the firewall to the rear wheel well here, and then the rear rails coming in and just tying into it, what they did was they had a rail go, the rear rail came all the way up here, all the way to the firewall, and was the inner sill. And then they put this closing panel here to keep water coming in. And then they had this tube going across here because that's right where the front leaf spring hanger was, and that helped support all that. Now, we don't need all of that because obviously the rear springs are now attached to the rails, frame rail here. And since we're putting it on a chassis now, we don't need quite as much structure here to spread the loads out as they engineered into it to begin with. So we're going to go ahead and simplify this structure a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and cut this here, cut this whole rail section here and the whole seat pan out. The original plan for this was to put a set of Saab 900 seats in it. My buddy has a set sitting in his shed, but they've been sitting there long enough they may or may not be in usable condition anymore, and he hasn't dug them out yet for us to know. Plus, he might change his mind and go with 4 individual buckets. We don't know yet. But the plan at the moment is we'll build a box section very similar to the original, but we're going to go ahead and go from the wheel well to the firewall with a straight sill all the way back. And then I might end up putting a support piece in here, similar to what this frame rail was, change the angle to where it's more like what this rail is and bring it down here, and then we'll bring the body mount off of all of that. And then if we do stick with a bench seat in the rear, this will create a whole bulkhead across there that'll then tie the two together. Well, I guess we'll start hacking away at getting this seat pan out of the way first, and then we'll cut out the frame rail. Well, after I get a new battery. So at this point I'll go in here and I'll drill all the spot wells out and peel all this stuff away from the wheel well and start picking all this stuff apart as well. So we're going to hold off on cleaning up the rear wheel well for the moment. And we're going to move back up to the front here, and we're going to cut a section here out to repair this. There's enough here to use this as a pattern, so I'm just going to cut across here and down and remake that piece. So since this piece isn't quite flat, it's easier to just go ahead and transfer it to a piece of thin cardboard before trying to cut out a piece of metal. And then we can actually test fit it and make sure it's going to look good here. Now the other thing I did was I ended up trimming some off of the bottom here because there was a little rust hole there. That way we can get rid of that rust hole, and we're extending this down an inch further than where it was originally, because we're making the rockers a little bit deeper than they were originally. Since this thing is on a chassis now, and we couldn't get the body quite as low on the chassis as we really wanted it, because the top of the rail here is actually pretty close to the top of the sill, and we need to get the floor up over the chassis without it touching the chassis. And we're already taking up enough footwell space by doing that, and the way this kicks in, that we didn't want to go any lower on the body. Plus it sits really nice in the trunk at the height it is. And we also have to remember that we're putting a carbureted small block Chevy in this. And when we mocked up with the LT1, the top of the intake on the LT1 is just about where the bottom of a carburetor would be. So we still have to add the height of a carburetor and an air cleaner on top of that to still fit under the hood here, or the bonnet, whichever way you want to talk about it. And we're already thinking that that might get a little tight as it is, so we didn't want to lower on the chassis any more than it is. So if we make the rocker just a little bit deeper, we're going to go 1 inch in the front and 1.5 inches in the back. That will visually make the car look a little bit lower to the ground, and it will also hide the chassis rails. So now I can transfer this to a piece of sheet metal and get it cut out, and then we can fit this thing and get that welded in. So the edge of this piece is rounded over a little bit. Now you can't see it all because it's rusted away. So we're going to duplicate that on here. It's actually not that hard to do. We can just start with this, which we can use the edge of a table or wherever you want. And we'll just That does the straight section, and we get to the curved part here, we can just work with something like this, like a little piece of pipe here that's been cut off. We can just and work that all the way around until we get it all done. So after just kind of hand forming and tweaking a little bit on this, I got it to fit here pretty nicely. And then I went and scribed it and trimmed it so it actually fits now. But before we actually put this in here, we need to look at the bottom edge of this, because this is pretty rotten right here. But the rocker originally came up and curved upwards. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and make this thing straight. We're going to cut this off, replace the rotten part here, and make this come out straight rather than curving that up, because that'll make the rocker somewhat simpler to actually build. So Rob from the future here. When we sat down to edit this video, somehow we couldn't find any footage of actually repairing this section here, or of doing the final fitment, welding or grinding of this piece here. So this is where we're going to leave off for this week. Now next week, we'll start actually building the whole sill assembly.